Well, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folarin. Well, Friday, remember, we had this very vibrant conversation on hate speech, and, we had to stop it where we would stop it. But, two other legally minded folks actually say, there's a bit more meat to that bone. And let's look at the legal aspects, because you recall when you summarize what we sort of concluded on Friday, most people that called us said that this whole matter about a death sentence for hate speech and setting up a committee, very much like the EFCC, but only for hate speech. Well, they said all of that was not on, and that why weren't they doing, that is the National Assembly, that is, why weren't they, for instance, setting up a death sentence for corruption, for example? Why weren't they doing things to help us out in terms of the economy, in terms of what they always say, providing an enabling environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of my guests, for instance, Malaki Ugumadu, who, as you know, is a lawyer. In fact, he's also national president of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights. He said, look, why do we run around in circles? Why do we keep on going around in circles? There are laws. Maybe that's where we should concentrate our efforts and understanding on, and then know what is trifling and what is substantial. Malaki Ugumadu, thank you very much for coming on.
Always my pleasure. Thank you for the
Indeed.
opportunity.
And also right next to him, his colleague, Olayinka Ola-Daniels, another lawyer and a public affairs analyst. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Well, hate speech, everybody speaks against hate speech. But then when the National Assembly got in on the matter in this proposal to have laws on our books, well, the first time out when we looked at it on this program, not too many people out there were impressed. They said, it doesn't look like they really have got their priorities right. How say you on the same subject?
First is to commend the TVC, your station, for remaining focused on this point, on this issue. One that clearly exposes the level of commitment of our legislations with respect to laws that can, drive this society forward. A law is not supposed to be enacted just to suit the caprices of persons or group of persons. A law is supposed to be futuristic and deal with the exigencies of a moment that will undermine the democratic practices of our time. Now, and it's supposed to, a law is supposed to also be historical in the sense that it captures what it is at the moment, reflects on what it has always been, and then projects into the future what is likely best for the society. Mm-hmm. And then go straight to the laws. Mm-hmm. Before now, we've had the sedition law. The sedition law. That sedition law was one of the vestiges of colonial rule, one of the tools of colonial engagement, and one with which so many nationalists and people who were involved in the independent struggle were engaged, mm-hmm. Such that anything they interpreted to be seditious becomes the foundation of your crisis for as long as they can pursue you. That law is no longer in existence in Nigeria. That law also fell. You remember the Ato Nwankwo and State, the case of Ato Nwankwo and State. That law fell flat as one of the very unfortunate reminders of colonialism in the country and one of the vestiges of tools of colonial engagement. Now, having said that, in Nigeria today, what must remain the barometer by which we gauge the legal regime is the Constitution. And I'm just going to mention a few sections.
Well, actually, not all in this particular tranche, since you're going to have, I need to hear from your colleague. But permit me to even go to him straight away. When Senator Aliyu Sabi Abdullahi, APC Niger, when he was coming up with this, I wonder if he must have researched, I imagine, but a lot of things that Malaki is, throwing up, and what viewers have already contributed, that it's almost tautological, legally tautological, almost the way people saw it, that we already have laws on our books. Why are you trying to reinvent the wheel in this particular instance? But perhaps he was concerned very, very seriously with threats to our social fabric. One group speaking against or inciting hate about another. And by the way, the law is crafted in such a way, the proposed law is crafted in such a way that he says if a person dies as a result of hate speech, then they're recommending bringing on this particular situation. How do you see it?
I'll start by asking. We're talking about hate speech, which some of us are totally against. We don't want it.
Everybody. I can't imagine anybody that will say, no,
yeah,
it's my right to be hateful if I want. Nobody will say that.
Yeah, considering our system.
Sure.
However, now, a whole spokesperson of a political party, as in the party that is in charge, that is,
the ruling party.
The ruling party. Now, coming out to ask for death penalty, that meaning that if the hate speech leads to the death of anyone.
Yes.
Most of these people that are taking money at wheels, that are diverting money at wheels, the money that are meant for instance, for probably medicals, for NHMI, whatever else, money meant for people, for the hospital to buy things. Now, people going to those hospitals coming out dead because those things that was meant for them were not available because the money that was supposed to be used to buy those medical, whether drugs or whatever, were diverted. Nobody is calling for capital punishment of sentencing them to death. No one is calling for that.
In other words, no proposal of death for corruption.
For corruption, thank you. No proposal of death for corruption. All of them are sitting there and they are laughing at us at this other side while they are enjoying whatever they are enjoying. But then they can come up to then decide what law they should make, then to kill people. Seriously, I see this group of people as people of self-centered, myself, I, and me alone. Myself, and I alone.
But as you know, it has passed the first reading. Which, I mean, I would have thought if it was as quote-unquote odious as many people have commented, it wouldn't even have gotten past that first stage. But are you surprised that it's actually got past the first stage?
Sorry.
Okay.
There've been a couple of efforts. And this is why we need to remain not just vigilant, but circumspect in monitoring developments in this country. There have been a couple of efforts on the part of the legislature, collectively, not the Senate this time, to muzzle one of the very critical rights that inure to Nigerians by reason of their humanity, no less by the constitutional provisions.
Exactly. That is freedom of speech.
And
that point was made very, very strongly the last time we had this conversation, that, you know what, that's what they're really after.
Now, the reason,
seeking to muzzle the people.
The reason why...
That's the point of view of those who called in.
The reason why I think that these people don't really appreciate the depth of these misadventures is that many of them didn't fight for it. I was a very 25 years, straight from the university, had my degree withheld, moved straight into CDHR, which I presently led, and then became, from that platform, the National Deputy Secretary of JACON. We were fighting the military. What was the whole fight? It was that, look, democracy is not just what you think about it because you mention it democracy. The robe does not make the monk. Democracy is democracy because of the integral ingredients of democracy, which includes free speech, freedom of expression.
Yeah, but there's
right
no absolute freedom
Now, I'll
of
come to that.
expression.
I'll come to that. And that is what you have under Section 45 of the Constitution. To say that Section 35, 37, 39 can be derogated from and that nothing in those sections will invalidate a law validly passed in the National Assembly for the purpose of security and good governance. That is a blanket provision. Our quarrel here is that in the body of legislation in this country, in the body of laws, we have enough to deal with this you are concerned. Why then, why not concentrate and dissipate energy with respect to other areas of legislation that is already choking the country? And I can quickly mention them. I have mentioned about sedition. Sedition fell like a pack of cards with the case of Arthur Nwankwo and State. Today, we have the Cyber Crime Act, in which you also specified penalties with respect to any infraction. That is an act of the National Assembly. Today, we have the entire, my colleague will bear me out, law regulating defamation generally,
yes,
which could be slander, which could be libel, and so on and so forth. I mean, as practicing lawyers, you can make hell of money out of any defamatory statements against you, provided you're able to prove it. Provided also that you will not run into the risk of what we call justification. Because justification is a total, it's a total defense.
It's an very strong defense.
So
it's just that it's very easy to prove. Very difficult to prove justification from lawyer folks.
Yes, forget about the difficulties. When you also meet the ones who are well grounded in it, it becomes indeed a defense, a total defense. So let's go back to the story. It is that how come a National Assembly, no less the upper legislative house, the Senate, that is still quarreling with the executive, the same government, with respect to passing the budget at almost the first quarter of the year, will have enough time to be monitoring who is making the hate speech? What further hate speech can be more than the transgressions of our people, even without speaking?
Okay, I hear you.
To what extent are you going to rationalize capital punishment, which is no longer, and I could go to that in a bit, because we've done a huge report, a huge research.
CDHR.
Yes, on capital punishment, to find out that the basis for capital punishment are just, two prongs. The one is to serve as deterrent. And it has been shown that in countries where capital punishment is still allowed, including in the United States, in some of the states of the United States, the incidence of crime on the basis of which capital punishment was entrenched as, as part of the law, the incidence of crime in those states were still on the increase.
Yeah. So it didn't have the effect.
So in Nigeria, corruption is corruption. If you make it corruption, if corruption is still on the increase, if you refuse to deal with the socio-economic conditions that breed corruption in the first place, it's immaterial whether you place capital punishment at the end of the day.
Okay, but maybe Yinka, from the senator's perspective, look. There's Mr. Ola Daniels, there's Mr. Ugumadu, and they're all telling us all of these things, but about freedom of speech and right. We ourselves here, do we not have that freedom of speech, indeed of thought? Do I not have the freedom to do my job, my work the way I see it? And he, in his wisdom, has determined that this would show, some sort of stewardship, because he was sent there to go and be a steward of his people and ultimately of Nigerians. He must feel that this is a cause with some merit. Whereas there are those that want to dismiss it, it's past the first reading. So maybe we're not making too much of this. If people are feeling this hot about the matter, and it wasn't thrown out at the first reading stage, there are just a few more steps before it becomes a serious contender.
Sorry. That house, the Senate and House of Representatives, it exists because they are supposed to represent the people.
Yes.
So it's immaterial what they think in their head.
Yes.
Please go on. Please go on.
Yes, but he still has to be. He has to have a brain while he's doing that. because I imagine that a legislator is, much more highly trained in doing what they do than the ordinary guy who votes them in. It's just a suggestion on my part.
Yes. Well, Section 12 of the 99 Constitution made it clear for the National Assembly to make some laws as regards some of the, some acts, some of, as regards some of the states. It's clear.
And this will be done by the participants as they see fit.
But however, Chapter 4 is clear. Chapter 4 of the Constitution, particularly 39. Now, when we talk about freedom of speech and of expression and others, in Suade and Abdullah, the court held that the fundamental right, that is the freedom of, he said it's not just the right of the people. He said it is fundamental. Now, in quote, he emphasized on the word fundamental.
That is that which everything else is based on.
Based on. So now...
And so you can't remove it.
At all. Having also recognized the fact that, yes, where some right, stops, maybe another one starts, considering the hate speech and all those things in all of this. But having said that, you making laws doesn't give you room to be, you said, well, it has passed first reading. Doesn't matter. Whether it passed second reading, it doesn't matter. It can be stopped at any time.
Exactly.
And that is the reason why we are saying, and we will repeat, the power belongs to the people.
Yeah, it can be stopped at any time, but are you not a bit surprised that it actually managed to scale? I mean, it would have, as you said, there still is the second reading. It doesn't necessarily, it wouldn't necessarily pass
this set of people are used to draconian laws. From their background, most of them in that house, their background, they are used to draconian laws. So now, coming up, and don't forget who are the sponsor of this particular law, don't forget, is the spokesperson of the Senate, in quote. That means that he may have upper hand. Of course, he would have done his homework, talked to his colleagues. Let's look at this. Then when it's coming, it's not, because we heard of so many things that have not even passed the first reading.
Exactly.
So many important issues that have not even passed the first reading. Now, from nowhere, this came up. Mr. Vice President just spoke about this probably early this year, and now by, late last year. And today, this is February, March, thereabout, and it's passing the first reading already. Meaning they have an agenda. They know where they are going. Unfortunately for them, they have forgotten that they were there because people gave them the power and people gave them the road to be. Unfortunately, because of our system also, of course, they live on the presidential election, and that's what we are saying. Let's divide, let's break it down. President will vote for president. You going for the National Assembly, come and campaign on your own. Don't leave it on anybody's office to get there. Probably when we do that, we won't have some of these people that we have in the house. We have people that have the minds of the people, that are concerned about the citizen, and they are concerned about laws that benefit the citizens, and not draconian laws like what they have done.
I wonder if it is connected. You remember when we had something of a scare, quote-unquote scare, it seemed that the National Assembly wanted to limit what people could do on social media.
Social media.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes.
And people were laughing derisively, but to show their disdain for any such.
And these were some of the things that stopped that.
Because the society has evolved. The world has evolved.
Yes.
Long gone are those days when only certain people had voices. Now, even the smallest guy possible could just open up a social media account and then his voice can be heard. And for some reason, there are legislators that didn't quite like that. We're accusing people of misusing the platform of social media. There probably is a sense in which these could be connected by some, Would you connect them, Malaki?
I had earlier said that there have been a couple of efforts, albeit desperate, sinister moves by this present Senate to undermine the rights and privileges of Nigerians. Again, if you want to be charitable to them, particularly with respect to this particular issue, you might think that they meant well, essentially because we've seen what hate speeches
Yes.
have caused in the
Yes.
society.
And the
In
danger,
short,
perhaps, from the other side of the argument, the danger perhaps is that if something like this, comes on board, then it might be thought that if he doesn't get his way, that is the sponsoring senator, if he doesn't get his way, then there are those who misconstrue it to say that hate speech actually isn't that dangerous. And we all know that it's a very, very dangerous thing. But whether you should legislate about it.
The whole crisis of Rwanda.
Yes.
And many of these very intractable wars that occurred in particular African continent started with hate speech. No doubt about that. The propaganda that sustained the civil war in Nigeria, essentially on hate speech. Now, that's understandable, but we're making a point.
Which might be where all of this is coming from.
You see, that is why they need to be creative.
Okay.
You cannot be applying the wrong solutions to an existing problem. Some of us who will be the victims of that wrong solution will not be, I think it was Abiola who used, you don't beat a child and still dictate that he wouldn't cry. You hit a child, allow him to cry. By that bill itself, some of us have been beaten.
Well, hate speech is going to even have to be defined, because if we're going,
these are the issues.
Who defines it?
We're going to have to define what hate speech is.
What does it mean in the first place?
Elements
Exactly.
that constitute hate speech.
Does it lie in the mouth of the person who says this is a hate speech to conclude that this is a hate speech? Or will that continually be the responsibility of the court? We're not going into the merits of it. What we are saying is that, hello, senators, we've got enough of legislations, unfortunately, which you passed. Because the fact that you're in 8th assembly does not mean that 7th and 6th assembly didn't exist. I've just mentioned a couple of them.
Yes.
Sedition is dead. The Cybercrime Act is inexistent. You have enough laws on defamation, both libel and slander. Why not look into those laws and then take steps that will empower and encourage the government which you belong to to possess the political will to be able to apply to every hate speech in the country.
In other words, strengthen the existing laws, right?
The existing laws are there. They're already strengthened. What is lacking is the political will to proceed against them.
And so, therefore, it would be an exercise in futility if you now come up with another one, unless it's
creating
just an
a commission.
easy way.
If you create a commission, what that presupposes is that there will be a director general. A director general has a fixed salary in this country. There will be deputy director general, there will be secretaries of that commission, there will be staff running into hundreds and thousands. In a country where states cannot pay salaries.
But
in
even,
a country
even
where the
with
debate...
what you say, even with all these things you say, Malaki, if it was universally thought that this was a worthwhile cause, then arguably we might not mind spending the money.
We're spending billions of naira with respect to election exercises in this country. We're doing that.
Yes.
But we understand why. So, we understand the anchor point.
Yes.
We understand that democracy itself matures when you talk of republicanism. Republicanism is the capacity of the citizenry to change government periodically.
So we will sponsor that.
And therefore,
we will pay the bill for that.
Therefore, if this is what it will take,
we will pick up
we
the
will
tab.
do that.
We will pick up the tab.
But not to begin to duplicate. Replicate.
That therefore
I'm going to pick
when
it up.
When you are preaching smaller size of government,
yes,
and you are doing this, it wouldn't work.
I'm going to pick it from there, Uncle Yuri. We have so many legislation in our country today. The question I want to ask, how many of them have been able to execute? For instance, on the law, the Constitution made it clear under section, what's it called? Part 4. That's part 4. Now, let me pick defamation. How many people goes to court to seek redress? Maybe a few. You know why?
It's
They can't-
notoriously
you-
difficult
you
to
know,
prove.
Thank you.
It's
Now,
notoriously-
that is
both-
taking me to the hate speech we are talking about. The truth is, even when it's passed, because I'm saying this to make our National Assembly, as in the people there, realize that you don't just waste our time. You don't just work on frivolity for nothing. Why don't you just concentrate on what we know we need and stop wasting? Because now, before you know it, the year is gone, next year is gone, they want to come back again. One, you pass this law, yes, it becomes law. The question is, we asked earlier, who defined hate speech? What are the elements?
Yes.
What are the things you must have to actually say this is HP? How do you prove it?
Are
Even
there
when you
anything
go
on
to
our
court.
books?
And don't
Are
forget
there-
that even the legislation that does not even go, that does not align with the Constitution, by the time you are getting to court, you are having issues.
But hate speech, which everybody just grabs hold of hate speech and know that hate speech is bad. But then there has to be a legal arbiter, that is the law, which is clear, unambiguous, and if it is ambiguous, lawyers will quickly take it before the courts again to remove that ambiguity. We must all know what exactly constitutes hate speech, lest, as people are saying, it is used to bully some other people, persecute some other people, chase people who they don't think are their friends all around, or if people are telling inconvenient truths and want to shut them up. Yeah. In fact, a lot of people called in on Friday saying that that last point is where this whole thing is, and stop dressing it up as if it is real work. That it's just, now, this might be uncharitable to the sponsoring senator himself, Aliyu Sabi Abdullahi, but then he has to prove his case because people just can't see how this is. It's not unimportant, but how it
the priority of legislation in this country.
Why is it right up there?
Now, Sabi should also, and he's quite visible. I listen to him a great deal. Senator Sabi should just oppose the speed with which this bill has gotten up to the first reading, with what is happening to PIB bill. He should tell us why it took,
the petroleum industry bill.
It took as much as 7 years to promulgate the FOI bill, that's the Freedom of Information. We were in the trenches pushing them that this is what fortifies democracy. When you empower the people and allow them access to information, they become more creative and more concerned.
Yeah, but they drag their feet on those that everybody is clamoring for, and then are very quick on those that nobody is asking for.
Now, if they are able to answer that, we will moderate some of our arguments and criticisms, and then move into the meat of this whole matter. How would you be proposing a law in Nigeria today? Do you know that terrorism doesn't attract as an act, not one leading to death, for which you could be tried for murder or manslaughter? It doesn't attract death penalty. So the hate speech, which is like
just careless, talking
incidental,
carelessly, maybe in some cases. There might be those who are using it for diabolical purposes. But then, largely.
I think Mr. Vice President even thought that it should be under terrorism.
So please,
that was what he said
let's put it in perspective and say that the quarrel is that, one, we don't have the luxury of time and to begin to interrogate areas of our lives, national lives, that had already been dealt with and documented. Two is that it will be a great disservice, a serious disservice to the Nigerian people that you are going to promulgate a law that cannot even be enforced. In law, we say lex non impossibilia. Don't legislate on the impossibility. Third is that we've not seen from even the bill as presently constituted the efficacy of that law. And fourthly is, what are you then going to do with other laws in the same area, including the Cyber Crime Act, that you are going to promulgate a law that cannot even be enforced? In law, we say lex non impossibilia. Don't legislate on the impossibility. Third is that we've not seen from even the bill as presently constituted, the efficacy of that law. And fourthly, is what are you then going to do with other laws in the same area, including the Cyber Crime Act, including the Freedom of Information provisions of the Constitution, including the whole thought, the whole negligent thought of defamation. And please, I beg to, it is easy, I'm doing quite a number of them. It's easy to go to court, provided the body of evidence you have are solid enough, and establish cases of defamation. And you are sure of getting serious compensation by way of damages.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, the position of the law, Supreme Court authorities, is that even if you didn't request, even if you didn't pray for award of damages, it is immaterial whether courts are not seen as Father Christmas. You will be awarded damages in deserving circumstances. So they should prioritize the activities.
Yeah.
They should move to areas where to freeze this economy, to strengthen the rights that Nigerians have, and give us access to governance in a way that we are praying for.
And this has been said severally by most articulate commentators. But I was just wondering if Yinka, what was sought, really trying to get into the head of those behind this bill, if what was being sought was something along the lines of some things are so bad, so insidious that just advising people to shape up and be decent and be, it's not going to work. You've got to educate people who don't know that what you are doing could tear our society apart.
Yes.
Because, as you said, why have this kind of a law? Maybe it would be to underline the fact that you cannot speak ill of anybody in this society. Look, I don't know how close it is to the concept of you can't deny the Holocaust, even though there are those who still say, F that. As far as I'm concerned, it didn't happen. But, civilized people around the world take a very dim view of that. Perhaps in a clumsy sort of way, this is the kind of thing that is being sought to show how this is a red-hot affair and the society will not tolerate anybody just because of the freedom of speech causing disaffection among us. Now, not supporting it at all, but could you possibly see that that might be what's behind the minds of those who are coming up with this bill, that Nigerians were so happy-go-lucky people. We don't know that those things we're joking about could actually cause a split in our society, yet we are one people, indivisible. I can see you're pondering that, and let me just take a quick break and then come back and get your perspectives on this particular supposition. Stay with us, please. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Malaki Ogumadu and Olayinka Oladaniel still in the house. And where I left it at was perhaps there's an attempt to emphasize the clear and present danger of careless speaking, especially that which extends itself to hate speech. We're yet to define what that means. The law, the court system, the judiciary, they'll have a field day with that. But as I compared it to, for example, denying the Holocaust, maybe there's a way in which people are saying that you can't just say anything you want just because you feel like it. And people can't be appealed to. So it is only laws that will force our people into what is a sort of a desired kind of position. It might not be comfortable to them. Totally almost irrelevant example. You see what Lagos State is doing on the Apapa-Oshodi Expressway, where people just used to cross the median anyhow on the expressway. So many sermons against this. Putting up an overhead bridge, it wouldn't happen, it wouldn't work. So what has Ambode government gone and done? They're now spending money that we could have used alternatively, raising barriers, so people can't go and kill themselves. So maybe they're feeling that people don't know how dangerous hate speech is, and so we need to put this kind of a caveat so people will now know, this society takes it seriously. And I'm saying this without prejudice to the arguments of freedom of speech is a fundamental human right that has been entrenched in our Constitution.
Law is made for the people, not the other way around, not vice versa. Now, if, let's assume, yes, of course, we don't want hate speech, we don't want the country to go, on flame. Yes, but then the question is, the people you are making these laws for, what effort have you made to sanitize these people?
Okay.
I can't remember the last time I saw any jingle on TV or radio, giving our people information on what hate speech is, or what the last time they started the Nigerian reform, something about Nigerian as a nation, right? And the next thing, we don't hear anything about it again.
Okay.
Somehow,
from the information side, I think one of the more popular ones is we are not terrorists, that kind of a thing.
Okay.
You know, that there's something going on.
Yes,
but you're saying that it doesn't extend
no,
to certain...
Thank you. What is the job of the information minister? What is the job of the orientation, whatever, information and orientation, whatever,
National Orientation Agency.
What are they doing? How are they informing the people, the citizen of the nation? What are they putting up to say, okay, this is
enlightening
wrong?
The people,
enlightening the people.
Educating them.
Thank you. Educating them to let them know that this is wrong. This is not good for us. When you do this, this is what happens.
So if they were up if those sectors of our society were up and doing, you're saying that then this...
I'm sure we won't be talking about all
there's
this,
no necessity for this.
I'm sure it won't come up. Because already people will know. And if anything happens, the law is there already. If it's about defamation, it's about libel and all that, those ones, if you do, then you find yourself in court. Yeah. It's clear people know that. Then if they have done their own part, I don't think we'll be talking about legislation for speeches and all that. Okay. And again, don't forget, let's reiterate this and let's eat it. We are not in support of hate speech. What we are saying, you can't come up for a capital punishment for what I don't even know about, that it is hate speech.
If my careless utterance, my hate speech utterance is lead to the death of another person, then, just put... You have to finish the sentence.
There's a saying that if you're not informed, you will be deformed. So if I don't have information, now I just made a statement, probably some careless statement, and the next thing somebody picking me up the next day, and I find myself somewhere in court, and the next thing they pronounce
ignorance
a sentence.
Of the law is not an excuse.
That is law, sir. That is law. That is ignorance of the law. We are talking about information about not even law this time.
The proposed bill is supposed to become a law.
If the proposed bill becomes law,
that is when it becomes law. Yes. We are not even talking about the information on law. We are talking about
the point he made is very valid. That look, instead of just jumping into this as if we're going to legislate on everything, including how we breathe and where we take our bath and the school that every person must go, instead of doing that, please, for the sake of the urgent need for the survival of this country, legislators should devote their energy and resources.
Why are we getting hot under the collar about this? What I mean by that question is that, Shebi, what did they say? Everybody, checks and balances. Aren't we the people some sort of check on, the National Assembly, so that, for instance, public hearing and all of those second reading, we go in there and we say absolutely no.
The excuse will be that they will get to that, isn't it? First reading, that's not that stage. Second reading, that is not that stage. Committee, it gets to a point where they will gather the people. But that's not what we're saying.
Because people can resoundingly say no.
Under Section 22 of the Constitution, you, the media, alone, just as we, students, in those days, struck down SAP, the media alone...
Structural Adjustment Program of the IBB regime.
The media alone that has a constitutional responsibility to check the government and hold them, that's the language of the law, hold them accountable to the people, can profile this whole thing, characterize it, and then put it where it belongs. Let me give you a very painful example. I hope you are aware, and of course we all know, that in less than days, a few days from now, Nigeria will if nothing happens in question of 2-3 days, will be expelled from the Edmond Group, haven't been suspended. Now, how can you, what more can be closer in terms of to agitate the minds of the legislators, whose responsibilities it is to collaborate with the executive and save us from this catastrophe because of the implications of being expelled from that group, even in times when we are dealing with terrorist activities. I make this point because if we reflect effectively on the scale of priority, you are unable to understand why our people are wasting time, dissipating energy. In the same way they have gone reordering election beyond what the Constitution says.
Well, they say they have the oversight function
by
law.
That is what they will tell you. We know what the Constitution says, and we can tell you that by the hierarchy of laws, that power they have cannot override what the Constitution says. But let's not go into that. So I make the point that, look, we have acknowledged that it is dangerous and bad, even very uncivilized, in this time and age to begin to engage in hate speeches. But my colleague and I have proposed that, look, there is a lot more that can be done by the government, leveraging on agencies that have responsibility
such as the Ministry of
to
Information,
the National Orientation Agency, and all that. In short, all the public relation offices of all the agencies, yes, including police, including all the agencies have their public, can synergize and then begin to sensitize Nigerians, begin this mass orientation that will take us away from hate speeches and elevate our capacity to engage logically rather than gutter languages.
As an officer of the law and understanding, laws and their intendment, I always like that legalism, that word intendment.
You soon join us.
You've talked about defamation, libel. Usually, and this is where, thank God I have two of you in front of me, this is against maybe one person. You defame a person, maybe a group of people, I don't know how that's going to work. But with hate speech, I don't think it can apply to one person. Hate speech is going to apply to a segment of the society that you are trying to disenfranchise. It's not a matter about Yori Folani, I hate your guts, that's different, that's different. But if you were to say this in the context of trying to cause people to see my type of people, a community I belong to, as different from them, inferior to them, then that's very, very corrosively divisive and must be knocked down with as much vehemence as we have, because we are one people. How about that line of thinking, Inka?
You may not totally be right, Uncle Yori, to your assertion. When you talk about hate speech, also one person, like for instance, I'm going to use precedent. Something happened in the past that because some people were abusing Mr. President, they were saying stuff to Mr. President, the people, Mr. President's kinsmen and some other allies or friends of Mr. President were the one fighting, and they were killing. It was Mr. President people were abusing. Now, all these are being put together. All these are being considered as hate speech. And don't forget, it was an individual that went to...
When you use the word abusing, I don't know if you prefer that word, or we're being critical of the president.
Thank you.
It's not quite the same as abusing him.
No. I try to manage my word. That's the reason why I use the word abuse. Okay. I could go further, and we don't want to say some other things. Yeah. But we know what we are talking about.
When you're critical of presidents, no, never mind our presidents. When you're critical of presidents in a certain way, around the world, I think you're going to get the security guys interested in you.
Very well.
So I mean, I don't. Let's just be fair about
People
that.
have said
It's
things
not a
about
matter about.
government
It's not
and,
about being draconian. I wonder if you first of all agree that, well, because of the institution of the presidency, never mind the single individual who is there.
We are not still there. We are not still there when it comes to democracy, because if we are still looking at that, then we are not there. We have seen advanced countries. We have seen their leaders being, I mean, all sorts were said, and nothing happened. In fact, people even came out. There were, you know, riots and all that, and he was doing his business, and no form of security agency went to harass them or whatsoever. So it's still part of the democracy we are talking about. Are we still there?
Yeah, but you
or
see,
we're just...
sir, I wonder. I know the time will come if this gets any traction at all, when these matters will be cleared up, but being critical of the president, for example, anywhere, I think is people's right. You know, it's people's right. But saying anything, for example, in a concerted way to bring the administration of any presidency down is going to be frowned against.
Of course.
You know, so even
now,
if the person thinks he has the freedom of speech to say,
let me make
I'm
a few,
sure,
because I understand where you are coming from.
Yes.
The beauty of constitutional democracy, sorry, if you like, expand it, representative democracy, is the element of participation. The more participatory, the more engaging, but more importantly, the more legitimate. Which is why those of us who claim we are vast in constitution making will tell you clearly that the content of a constitution is not as important as the process of that constitution making. The content vests validity.
So that when we in Nigeria say we the people.
Correct. The content,
that's how we came to make this constitution. And we know who these people were.
The content vests validity. We are practicing operating the 1999 constitution. Some of us who are critical, using your word, are clearly aware that it is a valid constitution. That's why we quote it. But we're also sure and certain that it lacks legitimacy.
Okay.
Because of the process,
which is what worries ordinary people who are not legally trained.
Exactly.
You said it's legitimate.
It's valid.
It's valid,
but not legitimate.
But there you go. But you still have to quote it.
No.
So
because
which is the subject?
Because it is valid.
This is another subject of the big issue on TVC.
Correct.
That people can come and deal with.
So coming back to the point that we're making. Now, if you extricate, if you alienate the power of the people to critique or at least show interest in the activities of the presidency or the the conduct of the president, you are already diminishing that institution as a democratic institution. I have told you that the beauty, the essence of it is the participatory nature of it.
Maybe the situation in America might be an example, a shining example of what you're talking about. The situation in America where just about so many people, including news organizations, pit themselves squarely against the president, their president, the duly elected president.
And you see television stations dedicated to it,
dedicated
on daily basis.
And he's going with the flow. Because that is what he has to do in that society.
Which is why you refer to
But that doesn't mean you can't attract the Secret Service if you go beyond a certain level.
Now, you see, we've come a long way. The activities of the Secret Service, in our own case, the SSS and this, cannot be removed from the management of a of a society such as ours. But it doesn't mean that because they exist, they can run foul of their powers too.
Okay, and also they are bound by the Constitution as well.
There are old cases. There is a case called Abakoba and SSS. It is, and it went up to Supreme Court. It is to establish the point that yes, whereas we appreciate your functions and responsibilities, you cannot overshoot your powers. As simple as that. So I make the point that, look, it's not just the executive that is criticized. The judiciary, our judiciary, where you and I practice, whereas you are not expected to, undermine their integrity and whatever, but you can critique their judgment. Even Supreme Court judgments can be critiqued. Wow. It is that way that we make the kind of progress. In short, some of the critics some of us do is to appeal.
Now, I don't think anybody has any problem with this. And this, I'm coming back to the subject of our conversation. Hate speech doesn't work like that. Hate speech doesn't deal, I think, with principles and reasoned arguments, is my guess. It's based on my biases. Yeah, quite frankly, let us say it.
And we're saying there are laws to take care of them. And we're also saying there are institutes.
My biases and my intention to cause disaffection.
Yes. My resentment about somebody,
yes.
my indisposition to see anything good about that person.
Yes, then you go on a soapbox and seek to persuade other people to follow your line of thought.
Particularly now that we have social media, we have mediums of communication, we're saying there is Cyber Crime Act. We are saying there is the defamation, the entire defamation law, libel, slander, all of them.
Which you think
we are saying that the Constitution is
adequate to accommodate
correct,
all of these,
correct.
You know.
In addition, very importantly, in addition to the responsibility of government, faced with this kind of situation, to overhaul the orientation agencies that they have. Let them go to town and do their work.
Okay, let me just say
just
this before,
so that
you want to comment on this matter.
Yeah, but how we sleep and the toilet that we go to.
Let me just say to our viewers that it's the network. You know, around this time, in fact, before this time, you should have been contributing to this conversation, but it's the network. The phones are not working. So sorry about that. Really, wish we could get your perspectives as always. But please continue. This whole matter about my trying to see through, Sabi's mind, Senator Sabi Abdullahi's mind, and maybe these are the kind of things that those in his side were thinking about.
For me, rather than wasting time on some of these laws, taking your time
because,
to
for
make
example,
new laws.
Wait a minute, sir. Let me get a bit more particular. When people go around saying Fulani herdsmen, marauding Fulani herdsmen, killing Fulani herdsmen, destroying my property, destroying my farm, murdering people, and you put Fulani herdsmen, Fulani herdsmen, Fulani herdsmen, I guess that's making some people a bit uncomfortable.
The Nati Allah group, for instance,
yes,
can decide to identify whoever has made that statement, go to court.
Thank you.
And invoke their right under the law of negligence.
Very well.
Touching precisely on tort to deal with that situation and claim damages. By the time 2, 3, 4 media houses like you pay 500 million, like some of us do ask in most cases, or maybe out of the generosity of the court and after listening to the appeal of the defense, come down to maybe 200 million. You pay in two cases in a year, they will stop it.
So self-censorship by organs that have this mass broadcaster
and duty and responsibility. That's their duty. But apart from Jerry Garner, who is the present chairman of the National Association Organization of National Orientation Agency? Who?
Seriously, because
okay,
like I was about saying that rather than wasting
that's even the leadership, let alone the work to be done.
Wasting your time on the legislation, the constitution is clear and is there. What effort have you made? Okay, fine, it's there to amend. If you want to, slot in something, okay, then amend that, probably the section of the constitution and all that. Let us have that, because most of these laws, in fact, there are a number of legislation that are not in line with the provision of the Constitution.
Yeah, okay.
And that is the reason why they are just there.
Okay.
Because when you go to court in the hand, they will say, okay, this is outside. But now, what do you do when you are making such laws? And this is going to come this way. Fine, you want to criminalize hate speech, no problem about that. But saying that it's capital offense by death, we do not agree to that.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Mr. Olayinka Oluwa-Daniels, thank you very much. This is like, as I said, this is something like part 2 of what we started on Friday to, sort of flesh it out. We'll wait and see how, hopefully people understand what it is they're talking about a bit better as a result of these few minutes of conversation. And then the opportunity for most people, I imagine, will be when it comes to that public hearing. Then they'll really hear.
But we've had very bitter experiences with this public hearing. Most times you see it on the newspaper, you are there, and it says,
They
There's
still
nothing.
go ahead and do what they wanted to do.
You may even be told that that publication is fake, that there is no public hearing. We've had such situations in the past.
And
I
then-
have been affected.
Then ultimately it'll be up to the president. Maybe it'll be up to the president to
Yes.
speak for the people and say that. But I hear. But thank you very much, gentlemen. Malaki Ugumadu, National President, CDHR, who believes strongly that this, if it were to go the way of the sponsoring senator, has implications for the fundamental human right of everybody, of every Nigerian, to freedom of speech within reason. Thank you very much. And Olayinka Oladaniels, thank you very much for coming on as well.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Indeed. So that's our program. Thank you very much for staying with us. We'll be back tomorrow, God willing, with a fresh edition. Till then, I'm Yori Folarin. Bye-bye for now.